Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 Hooper, current high school coach, teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids, and Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press. Omari, my guy, we had a listener reach out and let us know he hit his dumbbell shoulder press PR while listening to last week's episode. Look at us contributing to the healthy lifestyle of our listeners. But it did make me wonder, what do you listen to while working out?
Yeah, so since the pandemic ended and I started going back to the YMCA, I've pretty much just been doing straight swimming. Like, it's just been swimming only. I don't know why. Like, I know, especially in college too, I used to lift a good amount. But I don't know. I think once I started traveling for the NBA and stuff, I just realized I need to do cardio. Eat a lot of unhealthy stuff on the road, and I was like, I could be like the sort of like Donald Glover, I work out, but I'm eating. So I've got like sort of the dad bod type thing going, or I could just do some swimming. I swam a lot growing up. So whatever they play at the YMCA is what I listen to. But I probably lean more toward high energy, just like Travis Scott, Migos, whatever, something to get the blood pumping. I know you go to the gym or maybe you just do basketball stuff, Bryce, but please don't tell me you're listening to country music when you're under the bar. I just don't see how whatever country you listen to is going to give you the adrenaline you need.
I don't know any of the artists that you just mentioned, Omari, so I don't know what you're talking about.
You know Travis Scott. Come on, you know Travis Scott.
I mean, I've heard the name. I don't know. I couldn't name you a song. But no, I go the 2000s hip-hop for a little nostalgia whenever I'm in the gym getting a workout in. If I'm just running or doing cardio stuff, I actually listen to podcasts and do that type of stuff. So it's not always music with me. But I want to know what our guest listens to whenever he works out. So today we are very, very happy to be joined by Matt Babcock, senior NBA draft analyst for Basketball News and Babcock Hoops. Matt, welcome to the Pistons Pulse. And before we talk basketball, can you let the listeners know, what do you listen to when you work out?
Hey, first of all, hey guys, and thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys today. As far as what I listen to working out, I mixed it up. I mean, it's depends on my mood. I mean, sometimes I'll listen to the stuff I hear when I'm at games, right? Whether it be Drake or like the latest, hip hop, song and rap. I also like country.
Yes.
So I listen to country sometimes, but yeah, keep it mixed up, kind of keep things, a wide variety of music.
See, Omari, country's not all bad, man. You got to get in. You know more country than what you leaned on too. Like, you were throwing out Brad Paisley and all these guys to me the other day.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know some of the country legends. I can't say I'm sitting down listening to them, just on my lonesome. But I went to Michigan State, man. So, Michigan State is I feel like any Big Ten college, most of the student body is going to be really big in the country. So it was just more so through osmosis. It wasn't me seeking it out, but a lot of my friends listen to it. And I'm a music guy in general. Like, I could probably name a few country artists off the top of my head, so I'm not completely ignorant to it. I do know a little something.
Fair enough. All right, we brought Matt on to talk Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren. We're going to talk Isaiah Livers, Killian Hayes, all these guys. Matt knows his NBA draft, and we're going to get into all those guys. Matt, I had a chance to meet you at Summer League. Scott Hale, big listener and supporter of the podcast, introduced us, and we were talking about Jaden Ivey just a little bit out there. Let's start with Jaden Ivey. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you seemed like a big fan of Ivey. What did you like about his game going into the draft?
Yeah, I mean, I think saying that I'm a big fan of Jaden Ivey's is an understatement. I felt like for a while there, as far as NBA draft analysts go, I was kind of driving the train of pushing him into that first tier. He's just one of those guys. I think the first time I saw him in person this season was at Iowa, and just seeing his athleticism and his burst in person, it really blows you away. I mean, it made me think about Russell Westbrook, and they're not the exact same player, but from an athleticism standpoint, they're very similar. And I think there were similar, question marks with Russell when he was coming. I remember watching him at Adidas Nations before his draft. And all the same stuff are being brought up. Is he a true point guard? Is his feel for the game, spot on? It doesn't matter. That guy went on to be MVP of the league, right? And in large part because of his motor and his athleticism. So I just think Jaden, his upside is so high just because he's able to get to his spots with his incredible burst.
You said you're kind of pushing him to be in that first tier. So you basically saw him as equivalent, if not better, I'm assuming, than sort of that tier of Chet, Paolo, and Jabari then. Am I correct in that?
For me, all year, I sort of discussed with our staff behind closed doors that, I mean, I think he should be in the mix for all the picks, with that first group. And one big point that I always made was, the way the game's being played right now is, an on-ball creator is just so valuable. It's a guard-driven league, and with a guy that's got such extreme upside, the style of play and upside together, I felt like he should have been in the mix for picks as high as 1 or 2, and I mean for the Pistons to get him at number 5, I think I said this on air, but a number of times I felt like it was like highway robbery. I mean they should be so excited to get a guy with his potential at that pick.
And speaking of Ivy and the Pistons, a lot have been talked about the fit, quote unquote fit with Cade Cunningham. There's been questions. Does Ivy need to have the ball in his hands? Is he a point guard? Is he not a point guard? How much creating does he have to do? What do you think about that fit? Because I think Omari and I both agree he's very good playing off ball, and this is going to work out just fine, especially if his shooting continues to develop.
Oh yeah, I think it's great. I mean, he does need the ball in his hands for the most part to be, to really tap into his potential. But I mean, he played off the ball this year at Purdue a lot, and I didn't think he fit that system that well. But they made the most of it. He was running off screens and in Painter's system quite a bit. And as far as the fit, I think when you're discussing fit, it's mostly with how does he coexist with Cade Cunningham, and I think it takes a lot of pressure off of Cade. And I think Cade is a very mature, versatile, cerebral type player. And so I think having a guy like Jaden, take some pressure off him having to create so much all the time and force offense, let him, pick and choose his spots a little bit more. And let's face it, I mean, this is a young developing team. Having 2 guys that are capable of creating off the dribble, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, there's no player that's going to be creating off the dribble every single possession down the court, And so having 2 guys that got some stuff in their bag, I think is a good thing.
Jaden, I mean, his first step obviously is absolutely elite. I mean, even day one in the NBA, it's tough to see a lot of defenders be able to keep up with him. Why do you think a lot of analysts were lower on him than the big 3? Do you think it's just because he was so different, not being a 6'10" guy who kind of has the sort of unicorn skill sets we talk about? Or do you think the fit at Purdue maybe hurt him maybe more than it should have?
I mean, I do think the fit at Purdue held him back a little bit. I mean, I think if he was, even just looking at the college game compared to the NBA, just the style of play, his game fits the NBA better than college. I mean, he's played, in Purdue specifically, they're playing with 2 big-bodied, 5s essentially with Travion Williams and Zach Edey, which clogged the paint. Painter's system really wasn't built for Jaden. I mean, what he would do is. They ran their typical offense, which Painter's been running for years, where having their leading guard scorer coming off screens, but then they would break off of his system and you kind of run some high pick and roll ISO spots for Jaden and kind of really break off of what his whole coaching philosophy was generally. But just I think that held him back, probably scouts quite a bit. And then he does have some flaws. I mean, I think his feel for the game, his decision making, he's behind a little bit. I mean, he takes a lot of risk. I mean, he's always looking to make plays on both ends of the ball, which leads him to make some mistakes. So I mean, he's definitely got a lot of room for kind of polishing things up. I guess with me, I just look at his strengths, and kind of looked at it from a glass half full rather than half empty. But I would say those have all probably contributed to some scouts being a little bit lower on him than me.
So you brought up his flaws there a little bit. What do you think is going to be his biggest struggle in his rookie season? Because I do think, as Pistons fans, we get excited and we're hoping for the best and we're trying to be optimistic, but he is a rookie. He does have some flaws. What do you think is going to be his absolute biggest struggle this next season?
Yeah, I mean, he'll have ups and downs. I mean, he's a very confident guy, and he's not just happy to be here, right? And which is what makes me one reason I really like him. I mean, he is an alpha dog, and I have no doubt in my mind that he expects himself to become a star. And so I think, with that being said, I mean, he's probably going to force some offense a little bit. He's already pretty loose with the ball in his decision making, and so I mean, there'll be some ups and downs. But I mean, I'll tell you one thing: with that wide open space in the NBA, there's going to be some highlight plays, night in, night out.
Do you think that Cade would be a better fit for Jaden just in the heat he'll take off of him, or do you think Jaden's a better fit for Cade? Just in the sense that he's an athlete in the sense that Cade isn't. Which guy do you think would benefit more for the partnership?
I think probably pretty equal. I think they complement each other well. I think there is pressure on both of them to improve as outside shooters. I think that's one thing that's really going to really make their newfound partnership work is, can they each kind of, split time with the ball in their hands and, being more in catch and shoot spots. I think outside shooting is definitely for both of them where they really could create some even more like lethal damage together, by being able to provide floor spacing for each other.
You mentioned the shooting there, Matt. What do you think is better more important, I should say, for Ivey's long-term development? Is it that three-point shot, or is it the mid-range game? Because he wasn't real good in that mid-range area either. So what do you think would be better for his long-term development?
I like to see him improve both, right? I think just improving as a shooter, just, naturally just want to become an overall better shot maker. If you had to choose one or the other, I'd say outside shooting. The game right now has become so much more of, get into the paint or shooting threes. And so I think outside shooting for Cade and Jaden is definitely their ticket to kind of really open things up. And with Ivey, I guess Cade too, neither of them are pure shooters. But with Jaden, doing background work on him, he's such a worker, gym rat type, and he's got high level of confidence. And so I think the combination of the two is a recipe that he's going to improve. And he's already proven that he's able to hit shots. Watching him in person, he doesn't really pass the eye test as a shooter. It's not a pure shooting mechanics, but he's hit shots at a pretty high clip already. So I have a lot of hope that he's going to be able to at least shoot from outside good enough.
There's been a lot of comps thrown out for Jaden Ivey. People have said Ja just because they kind of look similar, and obviously great athletes. You mentioned Westbrook earlier. I like Donovan Mitchell, just being a guy who's an elite athlete, good shooter. I think Donovan probably shot better in college than Jaden did. Maybe not quite the primary passer you want, but when you look at the comps for Jaden Ivey, who do you see as maybe a realistic outline for if he hits those benchmarks that he could become down the road?
I don't necessarily love the Ja Morant comparison. I think Ja Morant's such an on-ball creator. He's so fluid with the ball in his hands. He's got it on a string, and his decision-making as a playmaker is really high. I see Ivey more as, even though he's really good on ball, he's more of one of these 2-1s rather than just like a true point guard. And so that's where like the Westbrook comes in. I think Dwayne Wade, Donovan Mitchell, those are guys that they all needed the ball in their hands to create. But they're not necessarily like the floor general run the show.
You mentioned highlights earlier, and the second first-round pick, the second lottery pick the Pistons got is Jalen Duren, and he can provide some of those as well. Let's start here, Matt. Where did you have Jalen Duren on your board? What did you think about the young man coming out of Memphis?
If I remember correctly, most of the year we had him in the mid-lottery, somewhere between like 6 and 10. I think when it was all said and done, we had him. I can't remember exactly which pick we had him at, but it was right in that range. He's a guy. I think he was at least the youngest American in this year's draft. It was interesting with him reclassifying and going to Memphis with Amani Bates, who had also reclassified. And they're, if I remember correctly, they're just a month difference as far as their birth dates go. Jalen was in December and Amani was in January or something like that. And Jalen was able to be in this year's draft and Amani wasn't, right? So, really young guy, just a ton of talent. And I think they were very lucky to have him slip to that pick. Because, like I said, he was a guy that we had pegged as the top big in the draft, and somebody we had as high as 6 or 7 at one point.
I guess this is a little bit more of a broad question, but it seems like there's a disconnect on how players with his skill set, vertical spacers can protect the rim. It seems like every playoff we see that these guys can impact the game a lot, like the Robert Williams, yet in the draft they tend to be undervalued. How much of that do you think played into him falling all the way to 13 when maybe from an upside standpoint you could argue that he was a top 6 or 7 talent in this draft?
Yeah, sure. It's something that we've been talking about quite a bit. Not even with just big-bodied fives, but also with small point guards. It's really gotten to a point where teams are clearly valuing switchable players, positionless type lineups. And so Jalen doesn't necessarily fit that. But he's not one of these big stiff fives either. I think he's very athletic. His physical tools are the first thing that jumps out when evaluating him, and I think he'll be just fine. I think it was somewhat circumstantial too with the teams picking as far as him slipping there, and just a great pick all the way around.
Do you have questions about his ability to be switchable in the NBA? Because when I watched the film, I felt like there was a long-term possibility of that. Just maybe he's still young, but you see the athleticism. Am I maybe projecting a little bit too much, thinking he can do that 3, 4, 5 years down the road?
I think he's got the physical tools to do it. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a crazy strength of his, like a Jeremy Sohan or somebody like that that's guarding all or Jabari Smith capable of guarding 4 or 5 positions. But I don't think he's real vulnerable either. I mean, I think, you definitely have some versatility with him. The biggest thing with him is his motor. I think he's got somewhat of a selective motor. But at the same time, I mean, we're talking about evaluating an 18-year-old kid. It's like, okay, does he have some growing up to do? Yeah, he's 18 years old. I mean, I think that's a pretty reasonable issue to have at that stage in his career. And so, yeah, long story short, I do think he's got a chance of being somewhat switchable.
What about his passing? I think that's one thing we saw flashes of in Memphis. And of course, he wasn't quite a hub guy. Like they weren't running a lot of stuff out of the short road with him. But do you think that's something that could be a staple of his game maybe in a few years?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like I said, the first thing that jumps out is his physical tools. I mean, the guy just looks like a fitness model already at 18 years old, right? I mean, he's one of those guys, you probably don't even let him go in the weight room, right? But yeah, skill-wise, I mean, it definitely underrated. I mean, I noticed that even when he was in high school, very good passer. He's got a nice touch on his shoot. I don't know if he'll ever be a guy that's shooting threes or not, but he's definitely capable of developing and stretching it at least a little bit as far as being a guy that could hit an open shot.
I actually got this as a mailbag question over the weekend, and I didn't use it for my mailbag, but be curious to bounce it off of you. Previous 5-star Memphis big man James Wiseman goes number 1. He's a different prospect than Jalen Duren, but it seems like him not playing may have helped him a little bit. Do you see any similarities in their games? It seems like James Wiseman may be a little bit more of a shooter than Duren is, but they're both young, both great athletes. Do you see any similarities in their games?
Yeah, pretty similar. I mean, I think Wiseman is bigger, longer. I think a little bit more versatile offensively. But yeah, I mean, pretty similar. I would put them sort of in the same category as far as young bigs go. Wiseman just, I mean, he can really. I mean, we're talking about being switchable. I mean, for being a guy that's 7 feet with an incredible wingspan and is skilled, he's able to cover a lot of ground defensively. And so that was the one thing I really liked about Wiseman coming out is he's a guy that I did project that would be able to shoot some threes, do typical rim running type stuff. But then he defensively his upside is really high. I mean, the guy really can cover a lot of ground, moving his feet.
So we've talked about Duren possibly being switchable. We've talked about the passing, his youth. You mentioned his motor, which I agree with. I think there's some defensive rebounding, just like technique and awareness things in terms of that. I think Omari and I differ on this in terms of him spending some time in the G League, at least to start the season. Do you think that that's something that would be good for him? Do you think that's where he should spend some time, at least the first half of the season, maybe up until the trade deadline?
I don't know. I think that's definitely an interesting conversation, and it's probably something that Troy and the coaching staff are probably having to weigh out. And I probably just need to keep a pulse on how things are sort of progressing with him. I mean, I think ideally you'd want to not have to send him to the G League. Let him sort of grow with their other young guys. I mean, I don't think there's a ton of pressure on them, kind of conquering the world overnight, right? I mean, they're really, really kind of setting things in place to build this team long term. And so, I mean, right off the cuff, I'd say I prefer him not going G League. But if you need to, I mean, it's a good option to have.
My issue with the G League is I feel like guys who are that type of athlete, especially as a big man, generally if you can protect the rim, you're an NBA player, so there's not much upside to going to the G League. Or you see a guy like Saban.
It helps too that their team's close, and so I mean it's not one of these deals where it's gonna be hard moving them back and forth. And so that's and I've talked to a number of NBA personnel about this, of the different strategies of having your G League team close, having separated. This would certainly be an advantage of having the team in the same city.
We talked there about Duren growing with the rest of this young core. When we get back from this short break, we're going to talk to Matt about some of those players, Cade Cunningham, Isaiah Livers, Sadiq Bey, what he thought about them coming into their draft classes, and then what he's seen from them in their short NBA careers.
All right, hey, Carlos, just a quick idea. How about if I say, hey, this is Sean Windsor, and you say, hey, this is Carlos Morales, and I'll go, and then we'll go back. You want to try that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Hey, this is Sean Windsor.
And this is Carlos Monarez.
And we are the team behind Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean, where we are going to talk about, you guessed it, sports, but lots of other stuff. Like what, Carlos?
Oh, we're going to talk about your favorite subject, Sean, food. Probably more food. Arts, culture, sports, TV, movies, you name it. If it's happened in Detroit, we're going to talk about it.
And sometimes we're going to have guests in who obviously know a lot more than we do about just about everything. But we're going to have some Free Press journalists to talk about big stories, folks from the sports world. We're going to be out every Thursday. You can find this podcast wherever you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We hope you'll join us.
we're going to talk to Matt about some of the other young guys on the Pistons roster. If you guys read me at the Free Press, and I certainly hope you do, but I've had Matt on in the past, I think before the 2020 and 2021 draft, to talk about the Pistons options at number 7 2 years ago, and then if Evan Mobley or Jalen Duren had a real shot at going number 1 last year. So I know you were a big fan of Cade, Matt, like pretty much everybody else was. For him, just kind of what stood out during the pre-draft process, and how has he measured up so far?
Yeah, I mean, not even just the pre-draft process. I mean, I've followed Cade for years when he was in high school. I remember, spending 3 days when he was, on one of those USA basketball teams. I think it was the U17 team. And he's got size, versatility, just a very mature kid. I thought he was a very safe pick in that draft, and he's essentially become exactly what I thought he would become, and what most people thought. He's going to be probably an all-star level player at some point. Just a good pick.
So you mentioned his maturity there. Has he been? He played on some really talented teams. Did you see kind of the alpha, the leadership as he played on those AAU teams, his high school team, and then even that 1 year at Oklahoma State?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely not, one of these big personalities, not like an Anthony Edwards type, alpha dog, but he's not soft by any means. He's a little bit more of a silent assassin in a sense. I do think he does he's got great floor presence. And even though I don't see him as just, a traditional point guard, he's definitely somebody that can really kind of control the tempo and do a lot of point guard floor general type stuff, even though that's not necessarily his calling card. I think long term, I do see him being the leader of that team.
Last season, Cade, of course, finished 3rd overall in Rookie of the Year voting, and it kind of came down between him and Scotty. This isn't really a Cade or Pistons question, but I guess I was just curious. With Scotty, for him to have the season he had, how much of that do you attribute to just him just being in the perfect position, and how much did he maybe exceed the expectations that you thought he would have going then? Because I know, just talking to people around the league and even some people on the Pistons as well, there were people who did think he belonged to be in that top 3 or 4 conversation. And, of course, Toronto ended up taking him a little bit higher than some guessed.
Yeah, I think, his year at Florida State was interesting. I mean, they used him as a point guard, which, he's definitely capable of doing stuff on ball and creating and all that. But it was weird is they played him on the ball on offense, but they also had him guard point guards on defense too. And it made it really hard to evaluate him, which I think threw people off, myself included. I mean, I've loved Scotty since he was in high school, and just, there was no doubt that he was going to succeed on some level or another. I think the one big surprise was like how effective he was offensively scoring the ball this year. And I think a lot of it was they used him in a better spot, more as like a versatile 3-4 point forward type, rather than having all the pressure of the ball being in his hands all the time. I'm really happy. I mean, Scotty's one of those kids, like, you just can't help but root for him. I mean, being around him, he's just such a star person. And, now it's his game's matching his personality, which is nice to see.
I only bring it up because I know some people were salty that it's like, well, he's in a better situation than Cade, so person numbers are better, but
I think with Cade too, I mean, he had the slow start. I think that really kind of threw him off. He wasn't hitting shots early, and really put together all in all a great season considering that he started so slow.
Yeah, I mean, he missed his first 18 threes, I think, to start his career. And you mentioned the shooting earlier. Is that the biggest long-term development for Cade Cunningham? There's all this talk in Pistons community about the ceiling, and can he be an MVP level guy? Is he just an all-NBA guy? Whatever that ceiling is the three-point shooting, is that the biggest development that he has to have? Or is there some other little thing in his game you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think outside shooting for sure would be the number one priority for me. I think he still needs to get stronger. I mean, he's got a very narrow build. And then the one thing that I think, and this is, if I had a hold up with him, evaluating him, is that he does not have elite athleticism. He's not a bad athlete. But, I mean, we're talking about a guy that you just mentioned, can he be an all-star MVP type guy? You look at most of these guys that get to that level. I mean, athletically, they're usually, on an entirely different level than most other players. And I don't think Cade's there. And so I do think outside shooting is important for him to open things up for himself. That would be first and foremost for me, is outside shooting with Cade.
Cool. Let's shift to Isaiah Livers. He's a guy that some people had a first-round grade on before he injured his foot in the Big Ten tournament. Only played 19 games last season, but he shot around 42% from 3. Never really looked sped up, and that he was pretty good at Summer League as well. What type of grade did you have on Isaiah Livers going into last year's draft, and how much do you think that foot injury maybe allowed him to be available to the Pistons at 42.
Yeah, we had Livers as a second-round pick, I think just about the whole season. And, it's very clear-cut evaluation with him from my standpoint is what he does well is, comes at a premium. He's a shooter and a shot maker. His physical limitations were what held me back on him. I mean, he's got sort of a bad body. What position is he? Is he a 3? Is he a 4? I mean, which I think, depending on who you're talking to, is not that big of an issue since it is much more of a positionless game than it used to be. But he's a guy that I see, as long as he can kind of keep his body in shape, he's a guy that can stretch the floor and hit shots, especially when you got all these young, talented guys coming in that can create off the dribble. I think he's sort of a glue guy type guy.
Yeah, he's really become a fan favorite here recently as Piston fans are trying to piece together this roster and lineups. And Livers is kind of, like you said, that glue guy that he connects things together because he can shoot it, do some things defensively. Let's look at the draft class before. And it was very interesting, Matt, when you were talking about Jaden Ivey, you mentioned confident and confidence a lot when talking about him. Killian Hayes is one who seems like that is an attribute that will wane at times. Was that something you noticed whenever you were scouting him before that draft?
Yeah, I mean, definitely play with a lot more confidence when he was in Europe, compared to how he's been in the NBA so far. I think that's his biggest hurdle right now is getting his confidence up. I mean, he hasn't been hitting shots at a high rate like you'd hope he would. And I mean, similar to what we were talking about with Cade, I think Killian, he's got to get to a certain point where he's hitting shots more because his foot speed isn't great either. And that, he's naturally becoming a pretty big guard. And so I think he's got to be able to hit shots to kind of open up his playmaking more.
You look at a guy in Sadiq Bey, who he had a little bit of up and down season last year. They put him into a bigger role, and he kind of struggled at first, but as the season went on, he became a little bit more comfortable as more of a shot creator type. Going into the 2020 draft, did you expect him to be available sort of in the late first round when the Pistons got him?
I was really high on Sadiq Bey pretty much that whole season leading up to the draft. I'm good friends with Fran Fischel, and Fran's son was on staff at Villanova, and he sort of suggested me to take a deep dive on him before he really got hyped up. And I mean, Fran was spot on with it. I mean, just a overachiever type. Good team guy, good team defender. I mean, he does have some limitations athletically, but I mean, he's really, proven to be a great, shooter, shot maker, kind of similar to what I was saying with Isaiah Livers, but his game seems to be expanding too offensively. So I think he's going to be a good starting, wing for years.
So that's kind of the big question about Sadiq Bey right now is the ceiling. I put out a Twitter poll the other day. How many All-Star games do you think Sadiq Bey is going to make? And there was quite a few zeros. The majority of people landed between 1 and 2. Do you think there's more he can add to his game? And what is that? Is it kind of the wiggle, the self-creation? Is there something defensively? What is it that he can really reach like an ultimate ceiling? And what is that?
Yeah, I think it'd be easy to say that he's got limited upside because of the lack of athleticism. And not that he's a bad athlete, but I don't see him being a guy that's like, oh, hey, this guy's upside is through the roof. I think he's more of a reliable type of player. But the same could be said about a young Chris Middleton, too. I mean, Chris has got size and he's a shot maker. Chris really doesn't have a lot to his game, but he just continue to improve on what he does well, and that's hitting shots. And so that's who I would look at if I were advising Sadiq, being like, hey, look at Chris Middleton. He really hasn't done too much as far as adding to his bag, but he just does what he does at a very, very high level.
Just talking to people, Chris Middleton is the comparison I hear for Sadiq the most, just as a guy that is not like the best athlete, but just really knows how to get a bucket. I'm going to move to the second Isaiah on the roster, Isaiah Stewart. Man, we've talked a lot about pre-draft and post-draft evaluation, and he's in a very different position than he was maybe when he was drafted, where a lot of people saw him as sort of an undersized throwback big. And in the last season, he was switching on to James Harden and Luka. He's proven to be maybe a better perimeter defender than post defender, and he's still pretty good in the post. Not as many post-ups because it's the NBA. They experimented with his three-point shot in Summer League and in the last season, and that looks like it might be coming along faster than some might have expected. I don't know how much of Isaiah Stewart you've been able to watch since he's gotten into the league, but going into the draft, did you see him as a guy that be able to switch and maybe hit outside shots, or were you more of the camp that this is an undersized throwback big?
Yeah, with Isaiah, going into his draft, I was probably higher on him than anybody. And a big part of it is I scouted him a lot. I scouted since he was, a sophomore in high school. And I saw the shooting potential even back then when he was, a sophomore or junior in high school. He's always had a great release, rotation. And I always saw the potential there. The biggest thing with him is I think a lot of people were sour on him because they saw a guy that was undersized 5, foot speed wasn't great. How does he fit into this league? And just me doing my homework on him and getting to know him personally, I knew this kid was wired to succeed. I mean, he's a total culture setter. I remember watching Troy Reaver's press conference when he first got hired, and he really wanted to bring back instead of culture, kind of similar to the old bad boys, toughness and hard work and physicality. And that's Isaiah Stewart in a nutshell right there. And so, aside from the sky and stuff, the background on him is really what gave me the confidence that this guy is going to find a way and kind of will his way into being a solid NBA player. It seems like that's what's happened.
So you mentioned it there with Isaiah Stewart, and we hear Troy Weaver talk all the time about drafting the person, not the player, and the character and all those type of things. Would you, looking at all of these draft picks, do you think he's kind of stuck with that? Is there one guy that maybe you would pinpoint? I know we don't want to overly critique these kids, but that maybe he waned from just a little bit, or in general, has he stuck to that kind of motto?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Troy's done a terrific job. I mean, they've got a different group of guys. I mean, it's not all these players are wired the exact same. I mean, I don't think there's anybody in the world wired like Isaiah Stewart. That guy is just an animal and a beast. I mean, that's exactly who I'd want to kind of set the tone for your locker room and your team for being a young team. He really does a lot of things that you'd want, a veteran, presence to do. I mean, I think Killian Hayes is the one that hasn't clicked like they had hoped. The good thing is there's time. I mean, he's a young guy. I don't think you need to turn your back on him just yet. But yeah, no, I think he's done a good job of identifying guys with talent that also have the personality traits to succeed.
Yeah, Isaiah Stewart was the 16th pick. Did you think that was high, or is that around where you had him?
Yeah, I had him late lottery most of the year. I think we had him going to Sacramento for a while. I think they were pegged at like 12 or something for most of the pre-draft. But yeah, no, that was right about where I expected him to go.
How much do you think him playing for Washington maybe hid his ability to move and some of those other things? Like, he's in his zone, and just getting back to that topic of guys' role in college and then they get to the NBA and it ends up being a lot different. If he played for maybe a team that had a more traditional defense like man, do you think that maybe the grade would have been a bit higher?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think, from an evaluation standpoint, I hate going to games when either of the teams are playing zone. I mean, it makes it so hard to evaluate them. And I think with Isaiah, I mean, it really he lost the opportunity of showing how competitive and physical he was on the defensive end because he was kind of just stuck in that zone. I do think that played a factor. And their team wasn't very good either. Their guard play was absolutely horrible that year. So I do think that held him back.
It's funny you say that. I was watching some U18 film today on Cam Whitmore, and a lot of the other countries were playing 2-3 zone. It's like you can't figure anything out. And obviously these guys are winning by 20, so they just start chucking threes. That was the thing with Jalen Duren as well, right, Matt? Like, I think we've talked about it a little bit on the pod, but can you let the listeners know just kind of the situation Duren was really in at Memphis and why maybe he wasn't able to really showcase all the things he could do, specifically like the pick and roll stuff?
No, sure. Yeah, I mean, Memphis had a very weird year. I went down there several times, and I mean, their guard play wasn't very good. I mean, I think that's part of the reason Amani Bates really struggles. They played him at point guard. I think it was his request to play point guard, which I think was a mistake. But it really, I mean, it felt like a dysfunctional system for most of the season. I know they had major ups and downs, but it seemed like Jalen kind of got lost in a little bit. And it was one of these deals where when he was good, he was terrific. But when he was bad, he was real bad. And so, somewhat of a product of the environment, I think.
Staying on Amani Bates real quick, because there was, right, Omari? Like, Michigan State was in on that whenever he was transferring, but he ends up at Eastern Michigan. What's going on with Amani Bates, Matt? And, like, what do you think we'll see from him this season at Eastern Michigan? Is he going to be a guy that ends up coming out in 2023 and be a lottery kid?
It's really hard to say. I mean, he's had such a weird few years. I mean, being so hyped up as a 15-year-old or whatever, and just feels like there's been a lot of pressure on him, and it's I think them going and requesting to play point guard at Memphis have really hurt him. I'd actually like to see him be more of a shooter, scorer, and secondary ball handler, playmaker, rather than just creating a lot off the dribble. I'm assuming they made the same request going to Eastern Michigan that he's going to do a lot on ball. I'm still kind of open-minded with him. I mean, as it stands right now, I don't think he's in a great spot, but he does have talent. So I mean, he has a great year. I think guys like myself will give him a chance to move up quickly because the raw talent is there. And another part with him too, he needs to get stronger. I mean, he really needs to invest in his body. It's just. Yeah, unless he gets stronger, I mean, he's going to get pushed off his spots pretty good.
I remember, I think it was last fall, Memphis had their pro day, and Imani Bates, his measurables were not great. Negative wingspan. I think they said he had small hands, and even before the season really got going, it seems like that kind of took a lot of the win out of the sails as far as him being the next Kevin Durant or whatever player he was compared to, Tracy McGrady maybe. For you, like how much does that matter? It seems like minus wingspans could kind of help when you're a shooter, but maybe if you're hoping he would be that dominant defender as well, that kind of knocks him a lot more than.
No, sure. I mean, we definitely look at the physical tools. I mean, it's definitely part of the evaluation. I think with Imani specifically, I'm not overly concerned with his short arms, small hands, as long as he's filling it up, right? And so, I mean, if we're looking at him as a 6'8" shooter scorer, does it really matter if he's got long arms or not? Like, I don't really care. And defensively, I'm more concerned with his lack of strength than I am his wingspan. I mean, obviously, if he had longer arms, that would be something that would be advantageous for him. But I mean, I'm certainly not writing him off because of it.
He's at Eastern now. We've seen guys come out of the mid-major level and have great careers. Of course, John played for Murray State. He was the second overall pick. For Imani, do you think it's probably a good choice for him to maybe go somewhere a little bit smaller where he can, maybe have more of an environment that's tailored around him? Or would you have liked to see him try to go to maybe a Power 5 school if the opportunity was there?
I would have preferred him, to go to a bigger school, but I do think it could work at Eastern Michigan. I think, there's two ways of looking at it. One, he goes there, kind of gets his swagger back and gets back to being the Imani Bates that he saw in himself, but before having the rough year this year. And so I like it from that standpoint. Go be the man. Go home. You're gonna have the local support. You can be the hometown hero. But on the flip side, you look at it negatively. There's gonna be a lot of pressure on him. I mean, I look at what happened with Patrick Baldwin this year at UW Milwaukee, and it just didn't work out well for him at all. And so I'm definitely hoping it works out for Imani. I mean, I certainly would like to see all these players, really maximize their potential. And Imani has a ton of potential. I mean, a 6'8" shooter scorer. I mean, I've seen him in high school hit some shots that just mind blowing. So if he can get back to being, the confident scorer and shooter that he is, it certainly could work.
As we're talking about 2023 draft prospect Imani Bates, I got to ask, Matt, I bugged you the other day. I sent you a message about Victor and Scoot. For our listeners, just how good is Victor Wembanyama? Like, do you see the generational talent that's kind of been pitched to us on social media and otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, he's an incredible talent. I mean, he's so big and long and skilled. I mean, he definitely needs to get stronger. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of people nitpicking his his lack of physicality. I mean, similar to what happened this year with Chet Holmgren, and I think it just sort of depends on how big of a problem do you see that. But regardless, I mean, he's similar to Chet. I mean, what he does well will translate. I mean, just being a rim protector, how big is he? 7'3" or whatever. Creating off the dribble and shooting step back threes. I mean, it's just definitely a unicorn type. But I'm really high on Scoot Henderson too. And I mean, one thing I talked with my guy Derek Murray about this, and I raised a lot of questions like this time of year of just sort of challenging ourselves as scouts. Scoot Henderson, Victor Wembanyama is there a world where Scoot's taken ahead of him? I mean, I think if I were to do rankings today, I'd probably have Victor number one. But I am asking myself as I continue to evaluate these guys, how close is it? And I'm open-minded at this stage.
Matt, I text you this. Like, I really like Scoot, man. He's really good. Like, he, to me, has turned over the keys to your offense. Let him go. He operates in pick and roll. I think he's going to be a 3-level scorer. I know the 3-point shooting has to come, but I'm really excited. And I just feel like people are going to hamstring him because he's only 6'2".
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, and he's one of these kids too that, I've gotten to know him personally the last couple of years. And this guy is wired to succeed. I mean, he's a guy that's doing 2-3 a days. I mean, he's been doing this for 2 years, and his family owns a gym right by their house in Atlanta. And he is the ultimate worker, alpha dog. Like this, you are going to get every single ounce of potential out of this kid. And going back to what I was saying about Jaden Ivey too, is like his style of play. If he does tap into that potential, I think this is the way the game's built. I mean, an on-ball creator that's like a dynamic athlete. I mean, I'm intrigued by Scoot, as a potential number one guy. Like I said, I Victor penciled in as the number one guy, but I'm definitely open to the idea that Scoot could earn his way of sort of chipping away at that.
I like Scoot because the name is Scoot Henderson. I'm just a very big believer in Like I feel like your name,
right?
yeah. Like I think your name is like 30% of your success level. And Scoot Henderson's not going to, sell cars. Scoot Henderson is going to be a good basketball player. But,
I mean, Victor Wembanyama is not exactly a household name. I mean, he is a household name, but it's not a common name either.
all foreign players are going to have cool names because everybody in America is named John and Matt. So, he has a built-in advantage right there. No offense to you, Matt.
There's a guy named Antetokounmpo that's pretty marketable right now. So.
Exactly. But especially for Scoot to be 17 years old and what he did, it's just like, yeah.
I mean, to me, it feels like Derrick Rose all over. I mean, like prime Derrick Rose, a guy that's just so athletic and tough that you can't contain him. I mean, if he's getting in an inch, I mean, he's dunking on you or doing something, right?
That's the comp that I continue to see that I think people really, really like. But you mentioned Chet Holmgren just a little bit ago. After this short break, we're going to put Matt and Omari on the spot. I'm going to ask them some questions about the 2022 rookie class and what we may see from them this upcoming season.
I'm Alyssa Robinson for the Detroit Free Press. When you wake up every morning, what's the first thing you do? Check your email? Me too. And when you sign up for our daily briefing newsletter, you'll get all the latest news sent directly to your inbox so you can wake up and be ready for the day. We also have newsletters about COVID-19 in Michigan, the latest entertainment headlines, as well as Woodward 248, a newsletter specifically for people living and working in Southeast Oakland County. And don't forget about automotive headlines and all the latest news from our Michigan sports teams. We have a newsletter for every personality and preference. Just head to freep.com/newsletters to sign up for any one of these great options and more.
All right, guys, we are back, and I'm going to put Omari and Matt on the spot with some over-unders here to start. And we're going to start with Omari's boy, Keegan Murray, of course. In his rookie season, will Keegan Murray average over or under 15 points per game, Matt?
I think that will be close. I'm going to go under, though.
Omari, I know where you're going to go.
Yeah, I was going to say over, just barely. Like, the thing that makes me nervous is that, okay, you have Sabonis and you have De'Aaron Fox are going to take the vast majority of the shots. Then you still have Harrison Barnes as well. So there's a lot of, I'm just curious to see how well Keegan meshes and where he's able to find his shots, because I also can't imagine he would start when you also have Harrison Barnes and Sabonis already on the roster, unless you're cool with Sabonis playing the 5. I mean, that's a good over-under. I would go slightly over, but just because I think he'll be pretty efficient, maybe being the fourth banana on that team. But that's a good over-under. I'm going to go he'll average 15.2 points or something like that.
And just so the listeners know, Wes did come up with all of these, so I'm not going to take credit for him. Wes, as you guys know, is the man behind the scenes that makes the podcast go, so I will not take credit for these over-unders. Matt, what was your thoughts on Keegan Murray? Like, do you see the ceiling, the lower ceiling that some people do? Where did you have him? Because we've talked a lot about Keegan on this podcast leading up to the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I had him as the 5th guy. For a while. I think it's crazy that any team took him over Jaden Ivey. But with that said, I'm a huge fan of Keegan Murray's. I mean, I think the way, his style of play fits the game so well. I mean, you really could plug him into any team, being a stretch 4 that can be effective without having the ball in his hands. Just a very reliable player and well-rounded. I just, and I think, he shot the ball really well at Summer League. And so I think a lot of promise.
All right, Matt, we'll start with you again here. Chet Holmgren, over under 1.8 blocks per game in his rookie season.
I'm gonna say over. I think just the way that team's built. I mean, they're gonna let their young guys go, and so I think he's gonna play major minutes. And he's just such a natural, rim protector, shot blocker. So I do think he'll be able to get at least 1.8 blocks per game. I'm
over 2. I think he was like the best shot blocker in college basketball last season, or top 2 or 3. I don't have a list in front of me, obviously, but. Just the minutes he should play, and I think day one he should be in that Miles Turner, Jaren Jackson, Robert Williams tier of shot blockers. So, I think he probably averaged 2 blocks a game as a rookie for sure.
All right, a very Piston-specific fun one here. Jaden Ivey, over under 1.5 dunks on opening night.
Yeah, I'm going to say over. If he's playing at least 30 minutes, I have a hard time believing that he's only going to. I think he'll get at least a couple dunks. I'm
over as well. I think the Pistons will run some stuff to get him some lanes to the rim, and he's probably bound to have at least one fast break where it's just him in the rim wide open. So, yeah, I would go 2 for sure.
I know we talked about it already, and it wasn't a dunk from him, but I love the play that Jordan Brink ran to start Summer League, where he brought Ivey off that pin down and then the lob to Jalen Duren. That was really cool. So I imagine we see something similar on opening night. I really like this one. So Matt, Paolo Banchero was the number one guy on my board coming into the draft. So Paolo Banchero, over under 4 assists per game.
I definitely think it's possible. He's got the skill set to do it. They've got a lot of young guys. I'm gonna go under on that one, even though I do think it's possible.
I think I'm under as well, just because you already have Suggs, you have Markelle Fultz, you have a lot of guys who are going to need the ball on that team, and I can see it being close. I can see him being around 3.5, but 4, yeah, I just think the way that roster's kind of structured, multiple guys who will be creating for others. I can see them using them a little bit more off ball, at least to start. No, by the end of the season, maybe he's so good that they're like, okay, just give the ball to Paolo, let him figure everything else out. But I see him probably averaging around 3.
Matt, do you see Paolo long-term as like the hub of an offense, a guy that you just run everything through? Does he have that type of upside? Because that's what I liked about him.
No, definitely. We had early in the year, we had him at number 1, and that was the reason we put him at number 1, is that he was probably the surest thing to be a guy that could be a primary scorer and offensive engine. And so, absolutely. I think that's going to be his role long term. It's going to be interesting to see long term is if he's used as more as a true big, as like a versatile 5. Because he's a big dude. And the way the game's going, being so switchable, I wouldn't be surprised if he ultimately ended up being like one of these, kind of point centers, if you will, where he's kind of creating a lot of offense, but he's guarding the big guy.
Yeah, we kind of talked about it on the pod a little bit. I think even the last pod we had before the draft for second to last. Although you had Paolo number 1 on your board, Bryce. I think I had him number 2, and I think I had Jabari 3rd. But big playmakers are kind of running the league right now and have for a while, and I was surprised a lot of people thought Jabari was like clearly an overall better prospect, because at the end of the day, like outside of shooting, and that's not, to say shooting doesn't matter, but if his shot's not falling, what is he going to give you on offense, right? And he's going to have off nights. And I just feel like no matter what, Paolo's always going to be able to impact the game. So if you're a rebuilding team, you probably want, I use the quarterback versus an elite wide receiver comparison, right? Like, unless you just don't think the quarterbacks are good, you're probably taking the QB. Like, I think Paolo's going to come in and immediately be able to put numbers up.
Speaking of Jabari, let's stay with that one. I'm going to move the line on this one from what Wes had. Jabari Smith over under 5 3-point attempts per game.
Ooh, it's a tough one. I think it'll be close. I'll probably say under.
I'm going to go over. I figure Jabari's probably the second best offensive prospect on that team after Jalen Green. And if Jalen Green's taking about 17 shots a game, I think Jabari probably falls around 13 or 14. I think half of his shots would probably be from 3 at least. I think just his easiest role in NBA is just being like that spot-up guy. So I wouldn't be shocked if he's taking like 7 or 8 a game as a rookie, honestly.
So staying with the Rockets, a guy they didn't draft in the lottery, Ty Washington. Matt, what do you think in terms of his chances to start? Over under 12 games started at point guard for Ty Washington this season.
Yeah, I'll say over. I think one thing that could really change things a lot is, is Houston going to commit to Kevin Porter long term? I sort of suspect that they'll move on from him, which would open up a lot of minutes and potential, starting spots for Ty. And also Houston, keep in mind, Houston, they play multiple guards a lot. And so I could see them, whether he's starting or not, I do think Ty ultimately will be a big part of that team.
Yeah, I think I'm over 12 games started as well. I'm pretty high on Ty. I've said it on the pod a lot. Like, I think he's a guy you look back and he probably ends up going a lot higher. I feel like the league struggles with guards who are not great dunker when it comes to like pre-draft evaluations, but just looking at the history of Kentucky guards, high-performing expectations in the NBA. And the only real knock on Ty outside of him not, being a Westbrook level athlete was like the outside shot, but he just has great touch. I can't imagine why he wouldn't be a 35-36% shooter eventually. I think by the end of the year, I think Ty and Jalen Green are their backcourt for sure. Like, after All-Star break, he's probably the full-time starter.
All right, we're going to move a little bit away from over-under. Right now, we're just going to go who ended up in the better situation, Jabari Smith Jr. with the Rockets or my guy, Benedict Mathurin, with the Indiana Pacers?
Benedict Mathurin was so good at Summer League. I think he's going to kind of carry that momentum into the season. Even though they do have a lot of guys on the perimeter, I think he's poised to have a breakout rookie year. So I'm going to go with Ben, even though I do think it's relatively close. I'm
going to go Jabari. I think just Indiana, they have a lot of guys in their backcourt. And Ben Bath did tear up Summer League. But I just think Jabari, you're probably a day one starter. I think him and Şengün are a pretty interesting front court since Şengün is a solid passer. He plays a little bit more inside. I think they mesh pretty well. You've got Jalen Green, so you're not the lead option, which I think if Jabari were drafted by a team that needed him to be the lead option immediately, he'd probably struggle a little bit. But now he's the secondary guy, so that helps him a lot. So I'm going to go Jabari. Like, I know he was probably bumped to not go number one, but I think the situation he's in now is probably a much better fit for him.
More likely to make an all-star game, Keegan Murray or Shaedon Sharpe?
Shaedon Sharpe, if he taps into his potential, I mean, he's got all-star type stuff to him. I'm not overly confident that either of them will be all-stars, but I'll go with Shaedon Sharpe on this one.
I don't know if Shaedon Sharpe is real. I feel like we're comparing.
He played 10 minutes at Summer League.
I don't even know if I saw him out there, honestly, and I watched that game live. I think I'm going to go Keegan, just because I've seen Keegan play a lot more. Some of the threes he had at Summer League were just I know he only had one season of good shooting in college, but he was just out there making stuff up. Like some of the deep ones he hit, and just his 3-point shot being that legit. To be honest, I don't know if I would bet on either of them making an All-Star team, but I think just because I've seen Keegan more, and since he could really shoot it, I can see him eventually getting into a role where he has to be relied on as a top offensive option. He's probably going to put more numbers up. Shaedon Sharpe long term probably a higher ceiling, but I just haven't seen him enough, so I don't feel comfortable putting a lot of stock in Shaedon right now.
Same question, more likely to make an all-star game, Jalen Duren or Johnny Davis?
I'm going to go with Duren on this one. I mean, I think he needs some time. Like I mentioned before, I do think he's, the last couple of years, there's been some immaturity issues with him. But, yeah, I think his upside is very high.
I'm okay. This is a swear. Yeah. People are going to hate me for this one.
Don't do it.
I'm going Johnny Davis. One, I think players of Jalen Duren's archetype in the modern NBA. If you're not like an Embiid, Jokic level player, and I think Duren's realistic ceiling is probably closer to Robert Williams, who's really good, but I wouldn't, I don't know if I would bet on Robert Williams making an All-Star game just because his value is probably going to be more on defense than offense. So unless you're Rudy Gobert, probably not going to make an All-Star game. I think Johnny just, balls in his hands. He didn't have a good summer league at all, but I have a little bit higher in Johnny than the average. I know he's going to be a good defender, but just the touch he has inside, ability to get to the rim, shot really well at the line. I do think he'll be able to shoot. And if he becomes a 3-level scorer, I think he will be, I just think his upside as an All-Star is probably a little bit higher. But that's a really big if. It's kind of like the previous prompt. I probably wouldn't bet on either of them making one, to be honest.
I was with you in Vegas, Omari. I know you don't bet on anything. And you need to talk to your boy Wes, because he set you up with that one. And usually he takes care of you whenever we do these. All right, we just a few more, and then we'll let you get out of here, Matt. Who wins a playoff game first? Paolo Banchero with the Magic or Jaden Ivey with the Pistons?
Oh, that's a good one. Obviously two young developing teams. I'm gonna go with Jaden Ivey. I think Detroit is not far off. I mean, they need their young guys all to kind of simultaneously take the next steps. But I think the guys are going to do that, and I think the combination of Cade and Ivey together, I think is going to be a very, very nice 1-2 punch.
Yeah, I think I'm going with Ivey too. I think the Pistons are a little bit ahead in their rebuild. Just already having a guy in Cade, I just think their pieces fit a little bit better. And Paolo's going to be good, but it seems like Orlando has 5 big men, and they're going to have to make some trades. I think they bounce the roster out over time. I just think Ivey's probably a little bit better positioned over the next 3 years or so.
Seems on the surface like an easy answer, but I'm curious to see what you go with. Who will have more blocks in their career, Walker Kessler or Paolo Banchero?
I'm going to go with Paolo Banchero.
Okay.
I have some question marks with Kessler. I mean, granted, I understand. I mean, he blocked shots at an incredible rate at Auburn. I just don't know if he's going to get nearly as many minutes over the course of his career as Paolo. And so when it's all said and done, I would bet on Paolo having more career blocks. Yeah,
I think I'm in the same boat. I think Paolo's probably going to play 3 times the number of games Walker Kessler is. I was surprised Walker went as high as he did. So yeah, Walker is a better. I mean, obviously he's a much better shot blocker as a player, but I'm just not convinced that he's going to play enough games to actually surpass Paolo. So I agree with Matt.
We're going to find out this rookie season, right, Matt? Don't you think, with the Jazz? Kessler's probably going to get a bunch of minutes there with the Jazz, and we're going to find out what he can do just playing drop coverage and protecting the rim?
No, sure. I mean, I think I've had question marks with him, even though I see what he does well. But just the way that the modern game's played, I don't know if it translates perfectly. I mean, college, you could kind of be a little bit more of an old school rim protector, kind of hang around the rim. The NBA, he's going to be dealing with a lot of space now, and so I just don't know how much he's going to play early on and long term, what kind of role he'll have.
Final one here. Better 3-point percentage this season. So in their rookie season, Jabari Smith Jr. or AJ Griffin?
That's a tough one too. I'm gonna go with Jabari Smith. I think their team. I don't know how good their team's going to be, but they're going to have a lot of young guys being aggressive, creating. I think he's going to get some easy looks and probably be able to shoot, a high clip.
I'm going to go with Jabari, too. I don't know what to make of AJ Griffin last year. Like, his percentage was really high, but I thought his shot was a little bit more funky. I don't know. I just feel like Jabari's a much safer guess. Like, from day one, he's going to be a great shooter. And maybe AJ Griffin will get better looks because he's not going to be keyed in by the defense as much. But I just think I trust Jabari as a shooter overall more.
Yeah, one more thing I like to add. I'm not sure what role AJ Griffin will play either. And so I think playing limited minutes, hitting shots, playing limited minutes is a hard thing to do. And Jabari is going to be playing probably 30 minutes a game and be in a much more comfortable situation. And so that's a big part of it as well. But I mean, both those kids are great shooters.
Yeah, I mean, Griffin shot lights out, right? Especially in conference play. What do you make, real quick here, Matt, of his feet? He had such that wide base, and obviously he made shots. So at the end of the day, like, do you really care? I always wondered about how well he could shoot off movement because of that base, off the bounce, coming off his staggered screen, whatever. Do you think they'll mess with that? Do you think they'll try to bring that in the NBA?
I don't have any problems with his shooting at all. I mean, I think the bigger concerns are, okay, is he somewhat of a one-trick pony? And also, too, there were some physical concerns as well. From my understanding, is he got I don't know if he got totally red flagged, but there were some issues with his medicals, which made him slip a touch. But yeah, shooting wise, I mean, he'll be just fine. And he's a big dude. I think he's going to be more of a long term, probably more of a 3 and small ball 4 than being a 3-2. But shooting's not a problem with him. If he's able to establish himself where he's playing in rotational minutes, he'll definitely be shooting the ball.
Yeah, I like him more as like what you would say, like a 3-4 than a 3-2 for sure. If he can scale to play the 4 a little bit, I really like what he could bring a team in time. Matt, this was awesome, man. Thank you so much for joining us. We definitely will have to have you back, maybe during the season just to talk Pistons whenever we start getting into draft coverage again. Thank you. Please let everybody know where they can find you on social media, the work you do. And I'm a big fan of basketball news. You know that. So make sure you plug that as well.
No, sure. Yeah, you can find our stuff on basketballnews.com. I run the draft coverage in our entire scouting department. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Matt Babcock 11. Actually, I think my username is Matt Babcock 11 on pretty much all the social media platforms. So go ahead and follow me on Instagram and all the different outlets. But we'll be a little slow here for the next month or so. But college practice starts in October, and we'll get back at it.
Big thanks to Matt, front of the Free Press, front of the pod. Great basketball mind. So really appreciate today's conversation, and we'll have you back on. So big thanks again to our editor, Kerry Jr. II, our executive producer, Anjanette Delgado, and our sports editor, Kirkland Crawford. Also, shout out to Wes, who set me up with the Johnny Davis show, the question, but it's all right. I know we'll get back on equal footing next week.